Greetings and welcome to In Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. We're very happy to have this conversation with Dr. Lesley Ann Noel, educator, innovator in design, education, research. The book is out and she is launching it in Trinidad and Tobago. So we have a conversation about it right now. So if you're hearing some ambience, it's because we are in the actual space where the book launch is going to be taking place at NALIS. But we want to thank you even more so for making the time before the book launch, Dr. Noel. What are you feeling like to say, okay, well, yes, the launch has happened in different places, but doing it here in Trinidad and Tobago?
So it's exhilarating. I suppose that's a good word to use. It's exciting, and then it's tiring as well because Trinis like to do things in a big way. So I have a whole lot of feelings right now, but I'm excited to be able to share this story with people in Trinidad. People who might even be mentioned in the book will be here. So it's nice to be home and to share this work with people.
And you speak about home, and one of the things that you always like to go in on is referencing where you are from a position or a place, so positionality. And how does positionality factor into, one, the book itself, and then two, the feeling about the launch?
So I'll say I'm from Diego Martin. I just had to say that I had to say that because actually we carry a lot of places with us as we do things. So, you know, I wrote this book as an affiliate lecturer at Stanford University. But this is not a Stanford University book. This is a Trinidad book. This is a Diego Martin book, a Belmont book, a Toco book. You know, so it's really, my positionality is very involved in making this book. So again, I'm really happy to share it here with people who understand my positionality much better than maybe some of the people who have read the book in the US or in other parts of the world.
And with that, I want to ask about emancipatory research, please, because sometimes it feels as though the work you do, some might describe it as swimming upstream a little bit, because you mash up a few people dolly house well. So we go to emancipatory research. How does that factor in? Give us the definition and then take us through it a little bit.
So emancipatory research is about research being defined by the people who are affected by research. And also it is about people being seen in a way that they're not normally seen in research. So, you know, it is about agency and control being shared and divided with the people who are involved in the research process. So I guess this work is emancipatory in a way because I shine so much light on Trinidad, on Port of Spain. You know, there's an illustration of Laventil by Che Lovelace right at the start of the book. And these are not places that would typically be in a design book, right? Someone else writing a design book is not going to talk about people in Belmont or stories about people from Jamaica. And so that in itself is emancipatory because I was trying to write a design book that people from my part of the world would be interested in. So I wasn't writing for a typical design audience. I really was writing for my mother, my son, my father, you know, so that ordinary people would be able to understand design. And then this book is also about change. So I use a lot of examples related to Trinidad, you know, so that we could see, oh, we could actually see the place that we want, and then we design it, we work towards it. So that's where I was going with this book.
But answer the person who says, them books will be real nice, this book real pretty, but in terms of moving from theory to practice, getting boots on the ground, is that a leap? Is it incremental steps? How do you start to do something like that?
Yeah, that's a big question. So the book is called Design Social Change. And really, to make social change, we need both incremental change and radical change. So it means that all of us could play a role in making some change. And actually, let me backtrack a little bit. What is social change? Social change is big change. It is like when an entire society changes the way it thinks about something. So if you think about here in Trinidad and Tobago, we talk about slavery a lot. An entire society had to change the way that they thought about slavery for slavery to actually be abolished. There are many things. If you think about our parents' lifestyles, lifespans, there would have been many really, really big changes that happened over that time. And it's both incremental change and radical change that kind of combined to make that change happen. So yes, people ask, can we really do anything? Do we really have any power? But the fact is, if there is something that we're really passionate about and we can do one thing, then maybe we're starting to change a few people's mind about it, their minds about it. And then as they start changing their minds and they start also spreading the word, eventually the entire society changes the way that they think about issue X. And that's how we accomplish social change. It is really, it is actually about also community, getting communities to think in different ways, and all of us can impact the people around us and get some changes to happen.
And that difference in thought process, and I'll say that disruption as well, because it's a shift, especially when you have one line of thought that you're going with, and you may have a feeling, a niggling feeling that there could be something else, but when presented with something else and that actual making that decision is really something, and leaning into that discomfort and going back to positionality, helping to change what is perceived as periphery and center.
Yes. And so you talked about leaning into that discomfort, and I'm going to actually go beyond that and say, actually, so there's a discomfort part, but also being very visionary and trying to imagine what is it that you really want. Sometimes we don't think that we have the power to envision something that's good enough for us. And so to me, that's the whole design process, where we could sit down and think, we really need more ramps in Port of Spain for it. That's an example. I haven't actually walked outside to see if that's needed, but it could be something like that. We really need more ramps so that people can walk more easily around, and then we could start talking about that and getting people interested in the issue. Or my son is left-handed, so I like to talk about left-handed oppression, right? If we start to talk about the issues related to left-handedness, then people become more aware of it, and people start to imagine, oh, actually we could have another world where left-handed people are more catered to. Or I spent the last week with two students who, one was vegan and one was gluten intolerant. We could start to imagine, what kind of food are they going to be able to eat at the Bacon Shack vendor, and then we make some change around that. So I mean, I'm making some light examples, but it is that we have to, it's almost like if you can imagine it, it can happen. And that's why this is actually a design book, because designers are visionary. Designers are always imagining things in their head and then making that thing real. But actually, it's not just a capability of designers alone. Everybody has that. Or maybe it is, I could say it differently. Everybody is in fact a designer, and therefore we can all do these things. We could all imagine these things that we want and need, and then work towards making them happen.
You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. But we take a short break, we come back because we are going into the other half of the conversation with Dr. Lesley Ann Noel, talking about design social change. Is going to be launched. Stay with us, we return after this. Back, we are speaking with Dr. Lesley Ann Noel, very happy to do so. And one of the terms that I've heard you use from time to time, positionality is one, but pluriversality is another.
Yeah.
So, and when the little that I heard, it made me think of carnival, because there's so many truths that are operating in the same space, bouncing off each other, but not necessarily negating each other.
I
But
like that.
how does that tie in with your definition?
That is an amazing example that I will probably use from now on. But pluriversality spoke to me. It's a concept, it's a Zapatista concept. So it's a Central American concept of a world of many worlds. And a lot of us think, okay, we live in the world. We think that we live in one world, but this idea of pluriversality embraces multiplicity and many realities happening at the same time. And when I moved to the United States, I found that that was very important for me to find theory that supported my existence, you know, to find theory that said, oh, actually, we don't live in one world, we live in many worlds at the same time. Because, you know, one thing about design and design education is that you can feel that you're not really a designer if you're not doing work that looks like it was produced in New York or Milan or any of these places that we're told are the centers of design. But actually, according to this kind of pluriversality theory, there are many centers of design, and actually we live in one. You just use Carnival as an example. I just went to Minshall's exhibition, and you know, that's an example. Trinidad is another center of design. Brazil is another center of design, and there are in fact many, many, many design centers around the world, and there are many ways of doing and being and knowing about design. So, you know, when people tell us there is one way, the theory of pluriversality gives us the comfort to push back and say, actually, there are many ways, and maybe you have chosen this one way, but there are other ways of being and doing and existing. So pluriversality is about complexity, which is uncomfortable for a lot of people, but actually it creates a lot of space for many of us then to have lives that are validated and acceptable, yes.
And it makes me think of the tree falling in the forest with no one there to hear it and whether or not it made a noise. And sometimes I wonder if, because something isn't documented formally to take forward, to share, to be monetized, whether or not it is of lesser value because it is impacting a smaller grouping of people. And sometimes I think ego is there, and because every conversation, there are levels of power and power dynamics at play.
Yes.
But this kind of goes to something that you speak to in terms of the stories favoring the hunter, if the lion not writing his stories.
Yes, so definitely. So my pluriversality in design made me comfortable with being very Trinidadian, very Caribbean, very Black, you know, in a world of design that is not typically perceived in that way. And actually, when I became very comfortable with that, you know, my own identity, you know, as a person from Trinidad who studied in Latin America and here, you know, when I became very comfortable with that identity, that's actually when I became more successful. Right, when I wasn't trying to fit in, wasn't trying to be very American. So people are very interested in the work that I do because I'm leaning so heavily into who I am. And, you know, and a lot of the research that I do now is actually dedicated to shining a light on other design practices that might typically not be respected, or you know, other ways of doing design that might not be respected. So I co-edited a book called The Black Experience in Design, which was about the work of 70 Black designers, and that's a pluriversal type of work. A colleague of mine in India just invited me to collaborate with him on a similar kind of text about Indian design. So I think I'm dedicating my life to otherness in design, but really bringing all of these different diverse design practices into the mainstream.
And you say that, and I think us still a little bit in terms of like the eternal other.
Yeah.
But was the process like you have this finite period of time that you're dealing with students on a course or a course of study, and trying to pull that out of them, especially when we've been taught, okay, this is what we're going to be assessed on, so this is how we do it, and because we're working towards that piece of paper, as opposed to something that can be so much more.
So you just use the phrase that I tell them doesn't exist. No one can come into my class and say, this is how we do it, because there might be another way of doing it. So I will present a model and say, this could be recommended, this is one way of doing it, but in my class it will never be, this is the way of doing it. And that actually can be very frustrating and confusing for students at first, because they're accustomed to being told that there is one way of doing things. And some people, I think, thrive in the environment that I give them, because they really start to understand, oh, they have control, they create knowledge, they have agency, they have power. And then some people do not thrive because they are wanting more direction.
Something that's a lot more regimented.
Yes, they want something more regimented, and I don't know how to do that. But they survive and they get through to the end. I think it's also very empowering to get that confidence in yourself and your own knowledge, especially at graduate level, at graduate school. And I work with undergraduate students, but I work with students all the way up to PhD level. And it's when we reach those levels that I think it's very comforting for them to know, oh, actually I create my own way. I don't have to follow any path. I can create a new path.
And do you run out of time sometimes? And I ask that because sometimes a conversation can be so spirited, especially when people are almost like finding themselves. I can do this. I can pull from this set of sites. I can cite these individuals as opposed to those, and have my backative to come and argue this point and just enjoy having ideas rub against each other and see what the synthesis is.
Yes. Yeah, of course we run out of time. And so the other thing is, if there are many ways of knowing and doing, and you have to create some focus. And so that's the only way. So first we open it up and you get that confidence in yourself, but then I encourage people to establish what they think their path is going to be, and then get to some conclusion within the time that we're working with. So the frame is often the time that we have to work with. When I work with a new PhD student, I ask, okay, how long do you want to be in this PhD program? And if you want to be here for 8 years, that's fine. If you only want to be here for 3 years, that's fine. And then let's figure out the path that will get you through.
Okay. And they make me want to start to triangulate now in terms of like the difference between knowing versus being with regard to knowledge creation. But we're not going to jump down that rabbit hole now. What do you want this book to help achieve, or for it to be a possibility of achieving, to kind of paraphrase you? And this is both using the parameters of here in Trinidad and Tobago and then a little further afield.
So, people always ask me, okay, what is the change I'm asking people to make? And I'm actually not even telling people what is the change. And in the class that I teach that's aligned with this book, it's the same thing. I'm not telling people what to change. I want them to figure out what is not good enough, what is not enough, what is, where are these frictions in life that we have to then kind of smooth out. So, I am hoping we will get to a society where we're not going to go into a restaurant like I did last week and someone is going to say, well, those are the rules, we know it's terrible, and we can't give you any good service because the boss said so. We need to be in a place where the boss will empower the employees, where the employee will understand, what is not good enough for the customer, and then everybody is working towards making things better. So the subtitle of the book is Take Action, Work Toward Equity, and Challenge the Status Quo. And what I'm asking people to do is those three things. So take action. Don't just wait. Don't just say, oh, that's how it is, right? Work toward equity. So we're looking to see where are things not fair enough for everybody in society, and challenge the status quo. So we can't just say, this is just the way we do it. Let's push against that, and so that we have a better environment for us to be living in.
Okay, and with that, I want to thank you for the non-prescriptive way that you're helping individuals to help create their own bridge to where it is they want to go. In terms of like, that's where I want to go. Okay, but these are some of the incremental steps that I can use. And so thank you very much, Dr. Lesley Ann Noel. And on behalf of the entire TTT News team, this has been In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Thank you so much for joining us.